Damn it, I started to record this video, and then I realized that I was doing it all wrong because I was on camera when I was doing it. I am watching and going through this anime in particular, and I looked over here on my enemy list and I'm looking at what's going on, and like Homicidal Lobster says TLDR not my thing, pedophilia and more literal terms of manipulation, and I'm like, why did you have to leave a review then and not just drop the series? So some context before I get into this review. This anime is about a boy, Ko, who gets tired of his day life, decides to go out at night where he meets a vampire girl, Nazuna, who befriends him and brings him to her apartment. They sleep and she bites his neck, but he doesn't turn into a vampire. She states that in order for a human to turn into a vampire, he must fall in love with said vampire. For the positives of this review, the art style is really pleasing to the eyes. Some of the shading in some scenes is really well done. The music is also quite nice. I found myself humming along despite my dislike for this anime. The concept of this anime could turn out to be really sweet if it weren't for all the negative comments I'm about to say, and let's get to the bad. For some light starters, the updaters, if you will say, the way that Nasino controls Ko is disturbing. While Ko has the free will to decide whether he wants to go to school or not, Nazuna almost guilt trips him into it into not doing it by the third episode, with the way that she just left him and gets all pissy when he went silent and when he went silent when asked to come back to school. Like right there, it almost feels so misleading. And having watched the whole thing, because like what's going through my head is we already know that he went silent because he didn't want to tell her how he really felt. He didn't. He already was basically trying, like, wanting to turn her down, and it's like she walks out, and it's like, I mean, yeah, they basically say her manipulative behavior when it gets more obvious when she comes back and kisses him to make him forget and doesn't even apologize. Why poor Ko was worried sick. Like Ko did not tell his friend how he felt, because Ko is a bit of a pussy. He's a scaredy cat that doesn't like he's got difficulty actually opening up about his true feelings to this girl that happens to be his friend. He doesn't want to tell her because he's afraid she won't like what he has to say about the whole thing. And it's like that comes out almost instantaneously once they start talking to each other again, and then the target audience for this anime is clearly set towards the male gaze, and I'm sitting here like and then it goes into the women in this anime are sexualized and objectified a lot with flattering shots of Akira's thighs and a bunch of sexual imagery of Nazuna. It just enhances a never-ending problem with the anime industry, which I usually ignore. But Akira is a minor, and while this is my review, so I'm stating all of my problems with it. Yeah, to really get down to it, let's talk about the blatant pedophilia. And as I know, as an adult vampire, and what you can tell from the hints, like the fact that she legally does drink beer, and that she's on one of these blocky cell phones before the flatter ones came out. Ko is a child. He states that he's 14 and he goes to middle school. And while they're supposed to fall in love and even go so far as to have sex, then to be fair, sex in this anime, or at least what they do as a vampire and a human, is just Nazuna sucking Ko's blood. But it's emphasized as a purely intimate and physical experience. You can argue that it's just because of the age of consent in Japan is 13, and as disgusting as it is, which holds true. But there's a prefectures in Japan that raise it from 16 to 18. I don't know what prefecture the author of this manga Kotoyama lives in when it comes to this. I feel like there's also a moral standard when it comes to the age of consent, where even if the age of consent is like 10, you would never ever see an 11-year-old and an 18-year-old dating and think that's okay, because morally it is disgusting. Also, to the people that say, well, she's an immoral teenager. If you think of her as a minor, then it's even weirder why they sexualize her so much. I'd like to remind her that the review of this is coming from someone who hasn't touched the manga. I'm not planning on it. Sure, the may be different, but it doesn't make this anime any better. Anyways, I will be seeing this anime through to see if any of these claims will be refuted, but so far I'm really not liking this. Reviewer's rating 2. Now, I'm looking at this. I'm a guy. I was born male, and I wanna throw this up. and all this. Now, this particular adult seems to have been basically immortalized as a teenager herself in that all that, but I want you to I want you to look at this. I want you to see this because this whole thing I just I want you to I want to say my piece about the whole thing. Like it's just bullshit. This is Nazuna in some of the skimpier outfits, you know, and some of her more revealing clothing on the whole thing. And I'm crying bullshit in a huge way because you know how Nizuna is appealing is she's got a nice face, and that's really the only thing this particular character has going for her at all. You know, the way that she's drawn. The show is very visually striking, but one of the areas in which the art of this show and the way that things are drawn falls flat entirely and completely limp-dicked is the way that this character is actually drawn. She's very misshapen. Her boobs are completely misshapen and basically flat. There's really no sex appeal to this particular character, and so she's going to have to make her case entirely on the way that she actually acts and the way and her personality. You know, she's got to rely on that element because she doesn't have anything else really going for her. You know, she doesn't have a form that is really appealing. Like, look at this. Look at the way that her boobs actually show up. And I can't believe that I have to do this. I have to kind of like educate my audience onto what the male perspective actually is because they're all like, this caters to it. And I'm like, well, if it was intended for male audiences, then it's doing a shit and underwhelming job of catering to us. And I know I'm not the only guy that's having these particular comments about this whole thing. Like Nazuna just doesn't she doesn't have you know, much of a bust to speak of, and, you know, as skimpy and revealing as the outfits that they often show her in the show, like, it comes up repeatedly in the show, and yet every time it does, it's just limp. Limp dick, no reaction at all, you know, because of the way that she's actually drawn. I mean, this is the art of the show. It's Nazuna, and it's just, are you a guy watching this? Are you seeing these images? Are you having you know, are you able to fancy the way that this girl actually looks in this thing? Like, are you feeling are you feeling it? Are you horny looking at her? They have her in some more revealing clothing at various points in this anime. They have her in some suggestive poses, but Nazuna, like, kawaii, you know, but there's no real, like, sexual attraction to her, and so, you know, I would have to say that with this particular character, it kind of feels very like I, you know, if I myself may find myself attracted to her if I ran into somebody like this in the real world, but what would be going on was just a draw and a lure to the personality of the character and the girl in question. I would not really feel sexually aroused by her. You know, she wouldn't have that kind of sex appeal, and so it's like, you know, potentially I might feel some romantic draw towards her, but I would never really be all that turned on by her. So that means that, you know, yeah, you could fall for her, but you couldn't actually you would still have problems in the bedroom with her as far as this character is concerned. And it's just because, you know, she's you know, like the way that her boobs are drawn, like they aren't even like really appealing because it's just like, oh, there's a triangle there. Like, you know, like that's not what real boobs actually like look like. I mean, I hate to break it to the people saying that this caters to the male gaze. Like, yeah, she comes up in some more revealing clothing and this whole thing, but her most revealing outfits are just a totally underwhelming in the whole thing. She doesn't really have anything going for her in that regard, you know. It's like, she might be worthy of cosplaying, and if somebody did it, a real girl did it, she could actually make her hot. But Nazuna in this show is just not hot. She doesn't have it, you know? Because like a real woman in her form, it's about more than having a nice face, to say the least, and that's the male gaze for you, and so the fact that these characters end up in a lot of suggestive outfits, it just doesn't really do much beneath the waist, so to speak, for these characters, and I think that she's what you're seeing and what I'm experiencing and looking at Nazuna is just like, wow, she's got a nice face, she's cute in that kind of way, but I don't have that spark of sexual attraction for her. I'm feeling completely like there's no appeal going on here. And so you'd have to be like a real girl cosplaying as her to have that going on. Like, you know, she's got a nice face, I will tell you, but that's it. Who's got boobs shaped like a fucking triangle? Like what the hell is going on there as far as this character is concerned? Like, it just the whole thing, like the show is really good at drawing its backgrounds. It's not so great at actually like getting at, her actual like her actual the characters that they aren't drawn well. It's like, the art is visually stunning, but it's more visually stunning for the background that these characters find themselves in and the atmosphere. It's got a perfect romantically suggestive atmosphere, and yet it lacks characters that are truly sexy. And as much as it tries to put them in skimpy outfits, it fails at actually making its audience horny. It just doesn't have that effect for me. I mean, I know that they're trying to make it out like this show is like, like horny teenage male bait, but it fails like so completely at being that. And so this show has to like live or die on my own attraction to like the liveliness of the interaction between Ko and Azuna. It's gonna have to convince me basically that Ko falls for her and that they've got a convincing relationship. And I gotta commit, like I'm 7 episodes deep at this point when I'm saying this, and I haven't finished it. I am going to. I'm gonna stick with it. But my general sentiment at this point in the whole thing is that Nazuna didn't really manipulate Ko. Ko made his own choices in this whole thing. Ko is presented as a more mature teenager than most 14-year-old boys end up being. Um, I know that it goes out of its way in canon to suggest that he's 14, but he doesn't do a very good job of presenting like a really great 14-year-old. He's just, one thing about Ko as a 14-year-old boy too is that he's too like the word that comes to mind is woke, but it's not right. It's not accurate. You know, he's too self-aware. You know, like like most 14-year-old guys. I mean, I will admit this. Like I'm a poet. I was writing poetry at that age, but I can tell you that like the eternal frustration of a male poet at 14 years old is like I have access to some of my emotions. I can tell you and put and translate some of them into words and it will flow, but the trouble that I feel in such a huge way is that there are some feelings that I just have difficulty parsing into actual language about what's going on, and a lot of it is things like mixed state emotions and emotions that, it's like I'm feeling conflicted and I have emotions that are feeling a mix of emotions that are often contradictory at the same time that have meshed into one, like love and hate for a person at the same time, like without contradicting or subtracting from each other. It's like this quantum like, it's almost like the way that they describe quantum entanglement, where the emotions are entangled together in such a way that you're feeling both at the same time and fused into one, like the way that I felt about my father at times. It's the it's the just emotions tend to be and are often very difficult to actually translate from something that's happening in my head to get out of my head and translate into language to describe to anybody else what it is the feeling is. And sometimes you just feel something, but you don't know how to put it into words. And that's the male experience. And it's something that even a boy that was like self aware and had the ability to tap into himself to translate a lot of his emotions into poetry. Even still, like, I wish my ability was more unlocked than it actually is. And Ko is very, very self-aware of who he is and what he wants for somebody that's 14, you know? I'm just gonna say it. And I'm gonna say this about my experience at that age. When I was 14, I don't think that I necessarily knew what I wanted myself. I knew that I was attracted to women. I knew I was into them, but I think that there were a lot of things that I would have, if somebody had asked me if like I would be attracted to women that are promiscuous, I would have been like, fuck no at 14. And then at like 36, it's like, fuck yes. You know what I mean? Like, I ended up with somebody that's on the, sort of the side of the equation, sort of a sex addict herself and everything. I have intimacy with that person. I'm more into the intimacy aspect of things than sex, but you know, uh, that's very personal for my channel, to get into. But yeah, you know, this this whole thing, this character just underwhelms. That like, look at that. I'm not horny. I'm seeing her in a top that, is partially opened and it reveals a bit of cleavage, and I'm just limp completely. There's just complete neutrality. This character has, I guess, what you say as far as like she's going to ride or die as far as the way that I feel about her entirely on her charm and personality. She doesn't have sexual the spark of sexual attraction is not there because of just how inaccurate the form actually is. This show's art is absolutely visually stunning, but it does a crappy job of drawing the characters themselves. That's the truth.